Everyone, my name is Savannah Morton, and for this semester, the topic that me and my group got for the debate was the right to exercise civil liberties versus the need for habilitation. And myself and Rosa are going to be going over in favor of the right to exercise civil liberties, and then Chad and Jessica are going to be arguing in favor of the need for habilitation. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by just laying out the main arguments, and then, of course, we'll go into detail further along as we get into the debate. So, first of all, when we're talking about the right to exercise civil liberties, we really need to define what civil liberties are. Civil liberties are defined as the right of the individual to manage their own affairs and make their own choices, so long as it hurts no one else in the process. And when we're talking about civil liberties, it's really important to define that because what we're seeing is that habilitation often leads to healthcare decisions made on behalf of other people who are then left unable to advocate for themselves. And what we're arguing here is that habilitation impedes on an individual's civil liberties and does more harm than good. And while it can sometimes improve quality of life in certain instances, it also impedes on people's bodily autonomy, and there's often no informed consent. Informed consent is when an individual plainly and explicitly states that they are consenting to that service or therapy, which oftentimes when we're talking about the developmentally disabled community, they can't give that informed consent all the time. And then we say, well, what about assent, which is basically looking at body cues and body language to see if the person is consenting, but it's not always 100% accurate, and it is still imposing on their freedom of movement. Next, I want to talk about ableism and the autistic perspective. I have defined ableism, which is just discrimination or prejudice against people with disabilities. One of the more common forms of therapy for people with special needs is applied behavior analysis, which is typically targeted toward the autistic community. ABA has been around for a while, and oftentimes these therapies that are really popular to essentially treat the developmentally disabled incorporate some form of physical prompting that does not allow for free will of movement and does limit bodily autonomy. There also have been autistic adults report their childhood experiences of ABA, saying that it was traumatic, and even if they did learn certain skills, it harmed them. And I do just really want to hone in on the idea that freedom to choose should not disappear just because someone is disabled. That's what we're arguing here. Lastly, I want to look at civil liberties through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've defined all those terms for you. You can read over them, but diversity is just acknowledgement of different backgrounds in professional practice. Equity is fair treatment and opportunities and resources for all individuals, and then inclusion is acceptance and equal treatment. And when we're talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, what we're doing in a lot of therapies that are targeted for the developmentally disabled is taking away that equity and inclusion aspect, and we're essentially othering them and not allowing them to make choices for themselves, even when those choices are not harmful to anyone else. And then my last point is that habilitation is inefficient. Not only is it expensive and sometimes inaccessible, particularly if you live in rural areas, the main problem with habilitation is that it's not individualized or person-centered enough, and therefore not beneficial to all learners. Everyone learns differently, but particularly we often think a one-size-fits-all approach to these therapies for the disabled, and that's not really how it works. And so we need more person-centered ideas, therapies, and services before we can even begin to discuss habilitation. And those are basically the main arguments I want to lay out for you. Thank you.
Hello, I will be presenting the case and the main points for the argument or the position of the need for habilitation. So just be going over the main points of that position. So first of all, I'd like to talk about improved quality of life. Um, and these are kind of based on universal objective standards that society would agree kind of constitute a rewarding, a meaningful, or you might say socially significant life. So things like building meaningful, rewarding relationships, connecting with other people, independent living skills, communication skills, things like that. Um, and then also in terms of ABA therapy, it's focused on reducing aversive behaviors, not only to the individual, but to others, and therefore society at large. So thinking about things like, self-injury and stereotypy. And then there also may be the inability or limited capacity to make decisions um, that are in the best interest of the individual. Um, so if they're unable to, if their decision-making capacity is severely restricted or severely affected, that could be an issue. So we can also think in terms of a parent-child relationship, right? The parent makes all the decisions on behalf of the young child that they deem to be in their best interest. Um, so we're thinking kind of along those lines when at least when there's maybe a severe developmental disability or severe intellectual disability that severely impacts the level of cognitive functioning. And then also, clients may not always make choices that are in their best interest. So, for example, when given the choice, they're going to, most likely, most more so prefer, engaging in a phone for hours at a time as opposed to, developing the skills to hold down a job, right? Or, obtain employment and be able to work effectively at their job. Um, and learning, putting forth the effort and the hard work that it takes to develop and learn skills necessary to um, do their job well. And then also, we think in terms of motivation that might be not there if all those daily living skills are done for them. So then there's not going to be that motivation. There's not going to be that need. Um, And then also there is something else to consider is that, all of us are compelled to follow certain rules and obligations and learn new skills. We think, for example, when we learn how to drive a car, we have to learn the rules of the road, the traffic signals, um, how to operate a vehicle, that kind of thing. And we're all compelled and obliged to follow those rules, or there's no or there will be consequences, and no one would make the case that that is unjust or restricting personal liberties. Um, and then there's also with ABA choice and planning that should be the primary focus. It should be something included. We want to put the person's interests at the center and constantly be um, kind of embedding their choices, their interests in therapy and planning and the decision-making process, involving them as much as possible, so you kind of have that least restrictive element in place. So that kind of covers the main points, and we'll dive deeper as we go here, building the case and supporting the case for the need for rehabilitation.
Hi, my name is Rosa Quintana, and I will be doing the attacker slash prover portion for the right to exercise civil liberties. So I wanted to start off by discussing the um, healthcare decisions made on behalf of others who are left unable to advocate for themselves. So um, this is something that we as providers we need to definitely work on. So we need to approach to ABA and other therapists that are in each individual's life um to help them and help them understand how to advocate for themselves as an individual. So it's but what we're seeing is that we need to treat them fairly and allow them to make their own choices and not the caregiver or um the healthcare providers or any other providers to make choices for these individuals. So, therapies that use physical prompting can significantly limit the bodily autonomy on this, and practices may imply on the individual's ability to move freely and help make decisions on their own body. So, again, we just need to focus on helping each individual physically prompt their own decision makings and not allow other healthcares or providers to make choices for these individuals. So autistic adults reporting trauma from ABA, there is so many unethical and harmful decisions that ABA providers and other providers um, also do that the adults with autism remember these traumatic events from ABA, and they do not believe that they should be mm, made to see their progress and gain the benefits um and the significant negative long-term consequences. These consequences that ABA provides can lead to such long traumatic events for these adults, and it won't help them change and be any better. So being unethical, and these practitioners need to listen to the autistic people and the community so they can consider using the interventions that will work for them and how to help the ABA community strive and do better for these children and for these adults as well. So we need to focus on no harming, find what works, avoid traumatic events for these autistic adults, um, allowing themselves to put their make their physical choices and allow for each individual to grow. Individuals with developmental disabilities retain the fundamental rights to make their own choices. Denying those rights can be undermine to their dignity and will exclude them. Supporting the decisions making will uphold their human rights. This brings the opportunity to make choices and live with dignity. So it is important that we root for them to receive love and justice and respect for themselves. And we should also be able, the same way that we get treated as individuals without any type of disability, is the same way that these individuals with disabilities should be getting treated. We should focus on their dignity and respect boundaries and allow them to respect themselves and advocate for themselves. So these experiences can be traumatic, and ABA highlights that forcing individuals into neurotypical standards is traumatic, and the pressure suppresses their natural behaviors. It can lead to emotional distress, loss of self-identity, and in this case, focus on behavior modifications and focus on growing call within the autistic community. The community deserves freedom to express themselves and be supported, because the same way that we want to be supported is the same way that they want to be supported. The disability um, community also relates to the finances and the portion that we are missing out on. So this part is also just as important because not only are we looking for diversity and equality, but we're also coming into the other side of it where financial support is being needed. So we are looking for socially meaningful means to stand in to show not only love, but to also help the individuals with, finances and communication and support and where they can find the support and how to find support that is needed. So we are currently um hearing horrible stories about ABA and how it's traumatic to each individual and how we can emphasize how to help them normalize and how to emotionally support them, give them self identification and and be there for themselves. So prioritizing their dignity and listening and involving autistic people to help them make choices in their life and help them get the support that they need because they don't receive it. So aside from not receiving support and stuff, the other thing is the expenses and not being able to access tools and resources that they need in order to strive and succeed and get the support that they need. So for social protection policies, they must address, the extra costs they suffer with disabilities and um all of that comes with a higher cost than, the average person. So the study shows that the cost of is highly significant and is not taken into account in the economy and well-being of people with disabilities, and it's underestimated. Growing evidence suggests that people with disabilities are most likely to experience poverty over people without disabilities. So we're starting to see the importance of how we can support every individual in this situation. We can see how this can put them into some type of poverty and debt, and we need to help them find resources and information to help them. So, these incomes and measures that, it's greater for them. So we need to help caregivers and the individual themselves find the support that they need, whether it's financially, emotionally, physically, however we can help them. So this comes to the conclusion of my bullet points, and I will be stopping my session here.
Hi, today I'll be talking about the need for rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is just not about teaching skills, it's about empowering individuals to lead independent, fulfilling, socially integrated lives. It enhances quality of life, reduces harmful behaviors, builds decision-making skills, and promotes self-advocacy. There are 5 key aspects for why rehabilitation is not only beneficial, but also essential to personal growth and community inclusion. The first point is to improve quality of life. Rehabilitation services significantly enhances independence by teaching essential life skills, fostering social connections, and improving mental health by reducing isolation. In the article of Bannerman, the ultimate goal of rehabilitation is to enable individuals with developmental disabilities to live meaningful, independent, and socially integrated lives. Without rehabilitation, many individuals may struggle with basic self-care, communication, and social interactions, leading to dependency and isolation. The second point is reducing maladaptive behaviors through ABA, also known as applied behavior analysis. ABA helps reduce maladaptive behaviors such as self-injury and stereotypy, which can be harmful to individuals and those around them. In the article of Burning Man, the reduction of maladaptive behaviors such as self-injury and stereotypy can significantly improve an individual's quality of life and facilitate greater community integration. By teaching emotional regulation and self-management strategies, habilitation helps individuals redirect their energy into meaningful activities. This creates a safer environment for both the individual and their community. The third point is building decision-making skills. Critics argue that habilitation may take away individuals' autonomy. However, habilitation actually does the opposite. It teaches decision-making skills by fostering self-awareness and understanding of consequences. In an article of Mentisa, young individuals with visual impairments often rely on habilitation specialists to make critical decisions regarding their skill development, highlighting the need for guided planning to ensure their long-term independence. Without proper guidance, individuals may make unsafe and harmful choices. Habilitation provides the structural support needed and ensure they develop safe, socially appropriate, and autonomous decision-making abilities. The fourth key point is everyone in the society learns rules and skills. All members of the society, regardless of ability, must follow rules, acquire new skills, and adapt to social expectations. Habilitation simply ensures that individuals with disabilities receive the same opportunities to learn the skills they need to thrive. In the article of Burning Man, just as typically developing individuals must acquire prerequisite skills to navigate daily life safely, individuals with developmental disabilities benefit from structured learning opportunities that promote safety and autonomy. From personal safety to workplace behavior, habilitation ensures that individuals can participate fully in their communities, workplaces, and schools. The fifth key point is choice and person-centered planning. A major misconception is that habilitation forces individuals into rigid programs. In reality, habilitation prioritizes self-advocacy and personal choice through person-centered planning. In the article of Burning Man, incorporating client preferences into treatment programs can enhance engagement and motivation, leading to more meaningful outcomes. By respecting individual preferences, habilitation ensures that people with disabilities have control over their own lives while receiving the support they need. Habilitation is not about taking away freedoms. It's about enhancing independence, promoting inclusion, and improving quality of life. It teaches essential skills, reduces harmful behaviors, supports informed decisions. By investing in habilitation tools they need to succeed, thrive, and live fulfilling lives. Individual, we have what a client is like before habilitation, during interventions, and after habilitation. Before habilitation, challenges and limited independence is happening. You have difficulty communicating. They struggle with self-care, have social isolation, and engages in maladaptive behaviors. While in ABA, during interventions, the client does communication training. They do daily living skills, they have social skills and behavior strategies. And after rehabilitation, they have improved independence. They communicate effectively, increase independence in daily tasks, engages in social interactions, and reduce maladaptive behaviors.
Okay, and now I would like to go ahead and present my rebuttal arguments in favor of civil liberties over habilitation. And I do want to also continue to talk about the autistic adult experience when we're talking about resources available and therapies available. ABA is one of the more popular forms of therapy, and there have been plenty of autistic adults who are now able to advocate for themselves as that when they're adults who report negative experiences of ABA today. And they cite things such as increased masking, which is essentially hiding their autistic symptoms, if you will, less bodily autonomy, and we touched on this earlier, but the therapy is focused on physical prompting sometimes, and also a focus on conformity with your neurotypical peers. And so when we're having these discussions, also in ABA leadership, there is not a whole lot of the actual autistic perspective or that many autistic adults involved in leadership in ABA today. And so um, if we're talking about conformity with neurotypical peers, that's often because we have people that are not autistic and are neurotypical making decisions on behalf of the of someone with neurodivergence. And another key point I want to make is that um, the system just needs to be completely changed if habilitation were to ever even become a viable option. And if you do want to talk habilitation, first we need to account for the traumas and injustices faced by the marginalized, in this instance, historically from these various habilitation methods, and also allow the developmentally disabled person to have more of a say. And this also applies to education and different therapies as well. We often have people in the developmentally disabled community who are not involved in their IEPs, their therapies, their services. It's more focused on the family and leadership who are not really giving a voice to their clients. And I did want to just really highlight this quote here talking about rights violations, because when we think about rights violations, we're typically say, well, if the person is not being physically harmed or physically abused, then it's okay and it's efficient. But rights violations do not always come in the form of some extreme act of abuse. A lot of times it can be more subtle and can lead to unintended consequences that harm that person in the long term. And I've kind of already touched on people's experiences, but I do want to say, even if we want to consider habilitation, there needs to be more effective leadership that are members of that community. So if we're talking, I know I keep saying ABA therapy, but just as an example for ABA therapy, then we also need to have autistic adults in leadership positions offering their perspective. And we need to account for the injustices that have been done in the past before we can even begin to have a discussion on the idea of habilitation. I think that it should be person-centered first and an individual's personal liberties first, and then we can maybe continue the conversation. Thank you.
Hello. We will now be discussing the rebuttal for the position of the need for habilitation. And I'd like to start by discussing assent withdrawal. So assent withdrawals, I think, is an important concept. The clients we serve. So, if we're attuned to their signs or their signals where we're causing undue stress, excessive, consistent aggression, whether that be, verbally or physical aggression, that kind of thing. Those would be kind of clear signs of assent withdrawal from the client. Bro and Smith 2023, they explain assent-based practices as emphasizing choice throughout treatment and seeking out assent during the intervention process. So one of the things I touched on in my main points was that person-centered planning, where we engage with the client's interests, and we're asking questions, and we're involving what they want within the therapy, and embedding what they want within the therapy as much as possible. And then also choice, emphasizing choice, giving the learners opportunity to kind of have control during the therapy process is key. And then giving them frequent opportunities to withdraw that assent, whether that be verbally or at the level of their understanding, whether it's a written prompt. So not only looking for aversive signs from them, but also being proactive with, asking or having written prompts, or encouraging them to use their speech devices, for example, to see if that assent is still intact. And then also informed ongoing consent from the parents or caregivers is also key, before we start treatment, before we start services, before we start any treatment program. And then if there's any revisions or updates to that program, they need to be made aware of that before we can implement those. And then also, and we can look at the BACB ethics code for support here, which says acknowledging that personal choice in service delivery is important by providing clients and stakeholders with needed information to make informed choices about service. So that kind of touches there on, when they're fully informed, then there's an agreement that either the client or the person that can make choices on behalf of the client, that legally authorized representative, is informed of what will be going on in the treatment program, and whether they want to assent to that. And another thing to touch on here is neurodiversity versus ABA. So there's a bit of controversy on that. So, in ABA, we do, bring up words like deficits and impairments and that sort of thing. But for the most part, the focus is on improving, increasing, strengthening those adaptive behaviors, those replacement behaviors, those pro-social behaviors, that to give our clients the opportunity to come into contact with that natural reinforcement, right? That natural reinforcement in the environment, in their daily day-to-day life, interacting in society. So for example, teaching those social skills, those communication skills of just basic greetings and basic conversations with a peer, and that, to do that effectively in a meaningful way, it should be, naturally rewarding, naturally reinforcing, the enjoyment of a conversation with a friend, for example. And then those, behaviors like stimming and hand flapping, of course, they have a function. It might be soothing or self-regulatory. So, we don't want to eliminate the reinforcing aspect of those behaviors, but replace those behaviors with other behaviors, alternative behaviors that are less socially stigmatizing. And then the argument I would make, or the case I would make, is that those are benefiting not only society, but also the individual, because it's kind of like a back and forth game where, if we have those pro-social behaviors in place, they'll be reinforcing things that will be given in return. For example, social praise, the benefit of making money at a job, and then, meaningful connections and relationships with others can be developed, when those social skills are in place. So take a look at a quote here from Beowulf and Risley, 1987. It says, on the face of it, they are at least behaviors of a person called subject or client that trouble that person, but more often they are also behaviors of people other than the one called subject or client. So we're thinking here in terms of behaviors that are kind of mutually beneficial and kind of that, back and forth reinforcing exchange that, behaviors that positively impact society, such as being able to obtain employment, hold down a job, and then having having a rewarding, meaningful profession, making money, which fosters independent living skills, which in turn builds self-esteem and self-confidence, and that kind of thing. And then, so we're really looking at encountering that natural reinforcement and, you know, the phrase socially significant comes to mind. So the main focus there, or at least should be, I believe, with ABA. So that kind of wraps up my argument or my case as far as the rebuttal for the need for habilitation.
So, in conclusion, current therapeutic approaches for people with developmental disabilities, such as ABA, often um, imbalances and fail to fully respect the individuals to aim for their support. So again, we need to find full support for these individuals that are in the spectrum, because just like we deserve the support, it's the same way that they deserve the support, whether it comes from love, affection, attention, um, helping them advocate for themselves, teaching them skills that they need to work on for their day-to-day life and their daily living skills. These are all so important for them to learn. And as professionals and providers, we need to help them get to where they need to get to, and um, not make choices for them on the daily. Um, the voices for people with disabilities, it highlights how harmful and impactful the method, and it emphasizes this in the need of inclusion. The person is centered in approaches. The approaches prioritize the diversest ways to individuals and learn to experience the world, ensuring that it is tailored to each person's need. So not only are we helping them, but we're helping them by tailoring what they need. So we're trying to focus on, including every person and their approaches and how they would handle, and the different types of solutions that we can help them find. So we're focusing on overall how we can help them in their day-to-day living. So we're also including economic barriers for these people with disabilities and adults with disabilities and families and caregivers with um, people in the spectrum. So we want to ensure equal and essential services, and we want to be compassionate, and we want a driven framework that involves people with disabilities in each decision about the care of essentials for creating a new and respectful, equitable support system. So we want to give them the tools and the feedback and where to go and where to find these places so they can get the accessible needs, so they can live a better life and not go into poverty and not be in a financial debt, and what resources can be used. So us as providers, as caregivers, as teachers, as other type of therapies, we should be able to help give them these sources so they live a better quality and everyday life. So we are respecting, we are helping, we are guiding, we are allowing them to make their own choices, and using physical prompting to so they can make their own day-to-day choices and have a support system that we can overall come together and support these children and adults in the spectrum. And that was it for my recording.
In conclusion, habilitation services play a critical role in empowering individuals with developmental disabilities to achieve a higher quality of life through skill development, independence, and social integration. While civil liberties are essential, habilitation does not inherently compromise individual rights. Instead, it provides structured opportunities to build meaningful life skills and reduce maladaptive behaviors that may hinder personal growth and social participation. Through rehabilitation, individuals can make informed decisions, learn essential social and functional skills, and develop self-advocacy skills through person-centered planning. This approach respects their autonomy while preparing them for the more independent and fulfilling life. Contrary to criticism, rehabilitation efforts are evolving to include client preferences, respect neurodiversity, and focus on dignity and empowerment rather than conformity. By embedding choice in ongoing consent and treatment plan, rehabilitation can serve as a pathway to genuine freedom, not a restriction of it. As society progresses, rehabilitation and civil liberties should be viewed as complementary rather than conflicting, with both working toward the shared goal of enhancing lives and minimizing individual potential. Habilitation services and quality of life enhances skill development, independence, and social integration, supports individuals with developmental disabilities in meaningful ways. Civil liberties and individual rights. Rehabilitation does not compromise rights, but provide structured opportunities. It helps reduce maladaptive behaviors that hinder personal growth. Build autonomy and self-advocacy, encourages informed decision-making, teaches essential social and functional skills, promotes self-advocacy through person-centered planning. Modern rehabilitation and client-centered approaches incorporates client preferences and respects neurodiversity. They focus on dignity, empowerment, and choice rather than conformity. Rehabilitation and civil liberties and complementary relationship aims to enhance lives and maximize individual potential, serves as a pathway to genuine freedom, not a restriction.